Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hoping that we could do a quick little icebreaker. If you don't mind going into the comments and letting me know where you are coming and joining us from today, what country or city, what you're excited to hear about. Would love to hear what city or country folks are tuning in from. Where are you joining from? What are you excited? What excites you about biophilia, about this conversation today? And, as we're going through this live today, we're happy to take questions and comments. So feel free, fill up the chat. If we don't get to it live, we'll definitely follow up afterwards. And there will be a recording ready as well. Just give it a minute for folks to trickle in. Nice. We have some comments coming in. Wonderful. We're going to give it another minute for folks. If you're just tuning in, thank you so much. Tell us where you're coming from, what city or country, and feel free to use this chat throughout the presentation to ask questions, to share a story, and we'll make sure to follow up if we don't get to all of it live afterwards. So we have someone from Michigan, USA. Awesome. Tampa, Florida. Nice. Great. Well, while folks are trickling in, I think I'm going to go ahead and start some introductions, get to the good stuff, right? So I'm Alexandra Bowen. I'm the founder of the Biophilic design community, as you can see on LinkedIn, and it's really dedicated to bringing together professionals and enthusiasts passionate about integrating nature into the built environment. And I love studying biomimicry and nature-inspired design methods. And I like to consult on the side on biophilia and nature-inspired design strategies. So I'm a consultant, a speaker, and a writer. And I actually also just launched a biophilic design course today too, so I'm really excited about that. And what I'm most excited about, though, is it is my privilege to introduce the speaker today. I'm so excited to bring her in for a live and to take her course as well, which she also recently launched, and she's going to tell us about a little bit later. She's an EDGE certified green building consultant, the founder of Green Biophilic Living, GBL, Kenya-based platform advancing biophilic, healthy, and culture-centered design across Africa's built environment. She's an EDGE certified under the International Finance Corporation and currently serves as a global commissioner for indoor air at the International Wellbeing Institute. She's the creator of the first African-centered biophilic design course, Biophilic Design Through an African Lens, which you're going to hear all about today, and is a curator and lead organizer of the Africa Biophilic Building Conference and Expo, which I believe have an event coming up, which you'll also hear about today. She's a TEDx speaker. She presented on biophilia as a climate mitigation and adaptation tool and continues to use storytelling research to reawaken culture-centered design and regenerative thinking across Africa and now across the world. I'm so excited to introduce her, but I wanted to mention before we jump in, we were actually chatting backstage, and I don't know if this is not a common thing. Let me know in the comments. Dark skies. So in America, we have this concept called certified dark skies. It's when there's no light pollution in a certain area, and there's only a handful of places in the United States that has the certification. And we were just talking a little bit about how it's a little dystopian, and it's kind of sad that there's a certification like that, and then about that, how that ties into mental health. But anyway, I would like to welcome our speaker and dive in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alexander. Wow. As I listen to you introduce yourself and introduce me, I always just love coming across individuals who share the same, passion from across the world. It's beautiful how one simple, word, one simple love can bring us together. So thank you so much for that. Amazing introduction. I'm really happy to be here and have this conversation. It's a conversation that's long due. The African narrative on biophilia is really, really a conversation that should be had like yesterday. So I'm happy to talk about the course. I'm happy to talk about biophilia in Africa. I'm happy to talk about the upcoming event and just to enjoy this conversation and interact with the audience, who I'm also really excited to see where they're from, what they're thinking, what biophilia means to them. So, yes, let's do this.
I love it so much. Okay, so as you just set me up for, biophilia is seen as very much like a Western trend, right? And your one of your opening statements on your course really struck me in particular. You were saying how Africans have lived this very long, way before even biophilia as a term was coined, right? So, can you tell us about a moment when you realized like this global design conversation was really missing the African story?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's an amazing question. And before I even get to answering where I realized there was a missing link, I think I'd like to first of all ground it in how the connection exists. Because to be honest, yes, biophilia is normally spoken about as a trend emerging from the West, and I do credit the amazing work that has been done by the pioneers on matters biophilia, Edward Wilson, Stephen Kellert, the researches that have been done by people like Roger, and while I do, give credit to the work that has been done, for me, from my perspective as an African, biophilia reflects a way of building that we have existed with, our ancestors have existed with. Um, I look at how my late grandmother, for example, lived in the house that she built on the slopes of Mount Kenya. It was built with earth, it was built with grass and wood. The home stayed naturally cooled, it connected us directly to the elements of nature. There were courtyards in the compound, and there were trees around the compound. The games we played were all nature based. I mean, there was such an interconnection between the indoors, the outdoors. It was just a way of life that was just nested in nature. And this was not a sustainability strategy. This was not a design element. This was just simple, common sense, simple awareness of your context in terms of climate, in terms of materials, in terms of culture. All of them were working together. But then when I came across research on biophilia and started participating in a lot of international discussions and platforms on biophilia, I realized most of the examples that were being used, most of the case studies were mostly Western. But then
Mm.
I look back at our designs, our architecture, I see all the elements, and I notice there's a gap here. So that gap in narrative became important to me. It became the work that I do in anchoring this narrative in biophilia.
That's beautiful when you describe growing up in your late grandmother's just environment, and it reminds me a lot of my childhood in Hawaii. I was very similar. I All the games were outside, using natural materials and leaves and sticks, and just getting dirty. And yeah, it
Mhm,
was pretty special now that I look back on it. And that really is what drew me to biophilia, is when I moved to the mainland. It's what they call the continental US.
mhm,
And there was this green withdrawal, and there were strip malls, and there was no nature. I was like, oh my goodness, what did we do to ourselves? It was a little
mhm.
scary. Yeah. So, talking about kind of our modern environments, right? Especially our cities, you describe there's some African urbanization going on, and it's maybe being influenced by foreign models and glass towers and concrete jungles. And it seems like this is really being replicated everywhere at this point. Everyone's looking the same, everywhere's looking the same. Why and what do you think has caused the industry to like shift so far towards these like foreign models, and what happened to like the identity of our cities?
Um, Alexandra, can I just shout capitalism and leave
Yeah.
it at that? because I think that's the main instigator and driver of how our buildings look like these days, how they just they're boxes,
Mm,
which are just designed very fast because you want maximum profits on a very limited amount of time. There's no thought on the human well-being in this space. There's no thought of how is the energy moving in this space, how is the heat, how is the warmth, how is the wind moving. It's just about
mm,
we need to meet these targets, create this number of buildings. What's the easiest way of making them? Just a box, 5 stories, that's it. Like I think capitalism has really really been a driver of this. But when I look at it from our perspective here in Africa, yes, like the glass, the steel, the concrete are the main materials that you'll find in urban areas. And when you think about it, this really grew or became something common during the industrialization area. That's in the western side. But
mhm,
when you look at the industrialization area, it coincided with colonialism here in Africa.
mhm,
And you'll find that during that period, the planning systems, the building codes were often introduced from the West, from outside, rather than being contextually, ecologically placed. And many African architectural ways of building were actually prescribed or described as primitive back then. So, because the colonial governance systems really shaped a lot of the regulations of building, of planning, you'll find that the works continued even after independence, and this meant that imported models became normalized. Even when they didn't fully reflect the climate and the context of the place. And I think we should also come to a point where we pause and ask ourselves, why do we continue, you know, um, reinstating this model since back then?
mm,
I think it's time to also slow down and reflect on how we live as well. And I think this is why we're having this conversation, realizing that woof, I'm living in a building that feels very cold, yet it's very sunny. Is this material really
mhm,
working for me? Is this design really working for me? And people are asking these questions a lot here in Kenya. People are really changing their way of building. People are moving back away from the city. So it's happening. The awareness is happening. And I think when cities don't reflect who we are, when cities don't reflect our identity, it messes up with how we see ourselves. It
mm,
messes up with our pride. It messes up with our self-esteem. Architecture is not just shelter; it's a container of emotions as well.
mm,
So it carries memory, and I think when you do not connect to a building, you don't even feel a sense of stewardship. Just
mhm,
just by mere observation, when you look at cities, the amount of dirt or trash or just a lack of disconnection from, really caring much about your space is very strong compared to when you have your home in the rural area. You're connected to the soil, to the ground, to the space. So when cities don't reflect our identity, I think it messes up with how we take care of the city, how we take care of the natural element of the city. We just don't feel connected. So there's no long sustainability happening there. And I think it also affects our mental perception, how we see ourselves, our sense of pride. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, incredible. Wow, there's so much to address there.
Mm,
But what I mean, we really do need to have some sort of connection in order to care and have any sort of will and drive to take care of it. And it's so
mm,
hard now where there's no places to connect authentically with nature, and kids
mhm.
don't even know where their food comes from. You ask a kid where blueberries come from, they say the refrigerator. It's like, wait, well, I guess technically yes, but no, there's a bush over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sad and seeing the next generation being even more disconnected with all this technology that we have. And that's
Mm,
probably a conversation for a whole nother live.
And I think just to add on to that, I'm not necessarily saying that we should reject modernity,
Mm.
but I think we should evolve, combine innovation with climate intelligence and cultural identity. Not necessarily just, giving it back and saying we're going to the caves. No, no, no. It's
Yeah.
just it needs to be a growing. We need to evolve the ecological connection, the climate, and the cultural identity with modernity.
Not agree more. I mean, you go
Yeah.
into all of these places and it's just more and more of sameness. You, especially in America, I mean, you drive through America, it's the same strip malls, it's the same stores. There's no identity, there's no sense of place. It's pretty
Mm,
sad. Talking
mm,
about kind of remembrance and sense of place a little bit, one of your biophilic approaches, you really hone in on this that idea of remembrance. So why do you frame it as a journey of like remembering rather than just maybe learning something new or yeah.
mm. Um, okay. When I mention remembrance, remember, as I mentioned earlier, this is a way of life that we lived, our ancestors lived, the harmony with nature. And when you look at the African culture, it was mostly about balance. There was an awareness that when there is no balance, it affects your well being. When I say balance, I mean there's balance between the land, the animals, the people, the lakes. There's a sense of balance. You're not taking too much, you're only using what you need to use, and you're not, if it's building materials, it's sustainable, it's coming from around you. If it is food, you're not taking too much that you cannot consume or storing too much. You're just taking what you need. So there's a sense of harmony in the way we lived and in the way we build. When you look at settlements, they expanded outwards rather than upwards. Social life really happened outdoors most of the time, and there was often a cultural and spiritual connection to nature, to land, to trees, to water systems. And again, these were not sustainability strategies. This was just a simple way of life that supported well-being. But over time, with modernization and urbanization and the adoption of more of these foreign models of building, some of that ecological and cultural connection became less visible. So when biophilia is discussed today, it can sometimes sound like a new discovery, when in reality, many of those principles and elements already existed. So when you frame this as a remembrance, it shifts the mindset. It shifts the mindset and moves us from coping trends to actually reconnecting with ecological intelligence that is already culturally rooted in us. It is already climate appropriate, it is already contextual, and it's already emotionally meaningful. My grandmother lived like this, my great grandmother lived like this. This is not something new. It's just a
Mhm.
remember, it's a way of remembering. So it helps us to also restore our identity and our belonging in our built spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love the idea of moving beyond an element. Like this is more than just an element and a strategy. And
yeah.
there's something deep inside of us that knows that this is right and this is where we're supposed to be and we can that's why we connect with it. I think one of the things that I love to do is like tell people to close their eyes and think of a place that, is really relaxing for them and pretty much every single time it's somewhere in nature, right? So why are
Mhm.
our indoor environments and where we live the opposite of where we actually seek solace? Doesn't make sense.
Interesting. You just say that, and you made me remember. I also love using well, when doing events, when doing talks, just asking people to close their eyes and think of, just relax and think of of a setting that you feel relaxed. Everybody will say a waterfall or the beach, or as you're saying, somewhere in nature.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And speaking of the elements in African architecture, did you want to talk about some of these slides right now?
Okay, yeah. So to ground that question in biophilia, I just created a small presentation to build on the idea of remembrance. So I just picked up documentation of African architecture from back in the 1900s, 1912, and just created a showcase of the elements of biophilic design. And yes, I'd love to show the six foundational elements. That was by Stephen Kellett. And you'll see the images, they're black and white because they're historical photographs, but they clearly explain the different elements. So, just quickly, when you look at the first element, the use of environmental features. For example, these are musgum huts, these are created using earth, mud. The shape, the ridges on the structure are very intentional. They help them to capture water. They help them to be able to move and make repairs by stepping on the different ladders that have been set up. But then they use natural materials. That's the earth around them. When you look at the image on the far, sorry, on the far right, this is a structure made with bamboo. Again, locally sourced materials, locally available materials. When you look at the image on your right, the animals, the chameleon on the door, and then you'll see the antenna on the door. That's still again use of animals in biophilic
Mm-hmm.
design. And animals are used representationally. You can have pets, but then you can have a representation of the animals. So at the doors, you'll find in some of these communities, in some of these countries, the use of animal features, as you can see in this image. And these are few examples because biophilic design, the patterns and the elements really goes deep into so many layers. So this is just a way of showcasing that, yeah, it connects to the different elements. So when you go to element two, the use of natural shapes and forms, you'll find architecture that is resembling houses of animals. You'll find architecture that has organic forms and organic shapes. You'll find architecture mimicking, even the shape of trees, as you can see in the far right. So again, the use of natural shapes and forms is something that was common, not as a strategy, but as a way, an instinctive way of building in harmony with the landscape. Element three, um, you see again use of natural patterns and forms. For example, this house in Nigeria, you'll see that they're using cowrie shells to create these shapes on the right. So this is a structure that has been built with earth, and the ceiling is made up of reeds and grass. And then you'll find the natural shapes and forms have been embedded using natural materials. That's the cowrie shells. You'll find the use of fractals within the spaces, repeating shapes in different scales. So all these elements that we talk about in the modern biophilic design elements are really, Alexandra, simply showcased here back in Africa, the use of light and space. This is a common feature all over Africa, the use of courtyards. And this is actually even a cooling strategy. This is a passive cooling strategy. The houses were always cool because you'll find the courtyards, rotating the air, or rather taking the hot air outside, bringing in the cool air. Then the courtyards connected the people in the building towards the outdoors. They brought in light. So yeah, is that. Then in element five, we see the incorporation of evolved human nature relationships where architecture is not just a shelter. It creates a connection between you with the natural world in spiritual ways. It brings the cultural element because you'll find in Africa, building was not just about the building structure. It was mostly about bringing the community together to build. It was about bringing people together to build, because building was not done by a contractor. No, it was done by the community. So it brought you together. When you look at this image on the far right, there are pillars. There's a pillar there with three tall stones, and for them, that's a sacred. The stones are sacred. They're considered very sacred in this specific community. So there's an element of spirituality, there's an element of sacredness within the space. And that showcases, the evolved human nature relationship. It's not just a structure, it's a bigger relationship than that. And lastly, when you look at even place-based relationships, this was a trip that we had taken to Lake Turkana just a few years ago. So you'll find that in Africa, there are still places where they live and build in harmony with nature to date. So on Lake Turkana, when you look at the place-based relationships, the structures are built according to like the source of livelihood is the swimming, the games, the fishing. Their life is all about the lake, and you'll find the structures built around the lake, but they don't make the lake dirty. The
Mhm.
element of balance, ensuring this cleanliness is catered for. So yeah, so this is just an idea of showcasing how all this African architecture, vernacular ways of building really fall into the biophilic design framework. Yeah.
That's amazing. When you're talking about the animal motifs, it always brings to my head on how humans have always had a special relationship with animals. I mean, when you look at cave
Mhm.
paintings and patterns and things like that, a lot of them are
Mhm.
animals, and I just find that just so beautiful that we can express that through those motifs as well. And it
Yeah.
looks like also there's some biomimicry there too happening,
Mhm.
where you're looking at nature and you're mimicking it in some of the buildings, and not only the form, but the function of the building as well. Looking at
Mhm.
maybe the ridges and, oh, that can capture water in a certain way. Maybe it's looking at a beetle. Who knows what the
Mhm.
original inspiration was from, but it seems like it almost like a biomimicry inspiration.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. 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 Agreed. Agreed.
Amazing. Yeah. And then your last point too on the water and respecting, where you are and having that
Mm.
balance. I just think in America, there's so many bodies of water, but we can't swim in any of them. And it's one of the most frustrating things to have the little nature that we do have in an urban environment. We can't even interact with it.
Yeah.
Um, it's very, very peculiar what we've done to ourselves. So these were beautiful examples. Thank you for sharing. It really seems that, African history is very rich, and it's in your DNA and building with harmony and with nature. So you talked
Mm.
about some traditional African frameworks and how they view the relationship between humanity and the environment. And that really does give a foundational understanding to inform biophilic design differently than a Western ecological perspective. Can you tell me a little
Mm.
bit about those differences?
Okay. When you look at the African, all these ways of building or living, actually, let's say living in harmony with nature, were systems that or ways of thinking that were embedded in someone by the time you were a child. You knew that you need to respect this tree, you can't harvest from this place, and all these things were probably brought in through songs, through folk tales, and they all connected to taking care of the environment. So it was not just something random that you cannot cut this tree. There was a story around it, and maybe even a story that could scare the trees. But the deep angle of it was ensuring there's balance. And when you look at the building element of it, of course, when it comes to the materials, again, not using too much, not creating mega structures that you can't even live in. It was just about being enough for you and your family. And when you look at the Western ecological frameworks, especially in recent decades, I see that biophilia, I see that green building, matter sustainability have really evolved in response to environmental degradation. So there's a lot of focus on mitigation, there's a lot of focus on energy efficiency, water efficiency, which is a good thing. But then when you look at the African angle of it, this is coming from a way of life, this is coming from culture. It's not about performance metrics.
Mhm.
It's bigger than that. It's a relationship with with nature. It's a relationship with the identity you have with nature. It's cultural identity as drivers of environmental care, not the metrics. So that's the big difference that I see there. Yeah,
That's amazing.
and that difference really matters for biophilic design because focus on biophilia from just integrating biophilia technically to reconnecting people emotionally and culturally with the environment, which I think
Mhm.
is very important because it ensures long lasting sustainability.
Yeah. Sometimes we oversimplify the metrics and we don't pay
Mhm.
attention to what really matters the most, which is sometimes
Mhm.
that connection to nature. Um,
Mm.
and with that, I would love to jump a little bit higher and zoom
Mhm.
out a little bit and let's talk about 2050. Let's look way into the future, right? So I read once you said your vision is trees grow through our buildings, not beside them. I think that's
Mm.
a beautiful ethos. So let's apply that ethos 30 or so years from now.
Mhm.
What do you want our cities to look like?
Oh wow, that's a dangerous question to ask me. But when I say that I'd love for trees to grow through our buildings, I'm really what I mean is a shift in mindset, a shift in seeing nature not as decoration around cities, but as part of how cities function.
Mm,
My vision for cities in 2050 is that our cities, our African cities remain unmistakably. Imagine cities where nature is integrated. Um, there's a huge focus on community because we are very communal people. But the more modernization keeps spreading from imported frameworks, then we become more and more isolated. So I'd love to see cities that bring back the courtyards, bring back places of gathering that are nested in nature, bring back this we are really, as a Kenyan, we really have a love for each other, we come through for each other, but then our buildings really separate us now in cities. But I'd want us to have communal gatherings, courtyards, nature centered around them, healthy environments, like not having trash around. And by this, I also see circularity coming in, ensuring that we are not wasting the same way our ancestors lived. There was no waste, there was no excesses. So incorporating an element of circularity, incorporating an element of our identity, our memory in the designs, in terms of the forms that are used, the shapes that are used, the colors that are used. There's a lot of earth colors when you look at our architecture. There's an image on the far right here. This is a school in Turkana that was built by Francis Kere. He's quite a famous architect in Africa. And this school has been is mimicking how an ant mound functions, the same way they breathe in and they breathe out. The ants live just beneath the mound. They don't necessarily live on the mound is for breathing. So that's the same principle that has been used in this school. There's no ACs in this school. It breathes the same way as an ant mound. Can we have cities that are really mimicked by studying nature, reduce the ACs that we're using? They're also causing a lot of heat into the cities. Have energy efficient and climate responsive buildings that can be able to withstand floods and disaster just by studying nature and mimicking nature. And I think what I'd also really want is an element of e-mobility. Just make movement around the city easier, reduce the amount of carbon with the personal cars and bikes. Yeah, so, and I'd also love a lot of water features that do not have sewage. Places you can dip your feet in, you can listen to the sound of water. So yeah, basically a city integrated with our identity, modernity that is biomimicked, materials that are local, and a real sense of community. Yeah.
I mean, if we could have even a tenth of that, that would be incredible. I would like to try to stay optimistic, but that is beautiful. I mean, we're in all of these over air conditioned, overheated boxes with
Mm,
no
mm,
connection to the weather
Mm,
outside or patterns or light
mm,
or anything.
mm, mm.
And I love what you said too about waste. You know, nature doesn't know what waste is. Nature does not waste. And so if we could model, nature's done all this, right? I mean,
Yeah,
3.8 billion years of research and development. It would make sense that we look to nature as well as some of the guide on
yeah.
principles and how we connect and build and design. Yeah, that's
A- And
beautiful.
and just to add a little bit on it, I think even from the economical perspective of realizing such a city, having a city that looks like Africa, looks like the different tribes and the different communities, that in itself is a tourism destination. That's even a driver of tourism and heritage. And that can, be anchored within the tourism space and even help, uplift the economic, just the buildings themselves. So I think it's just how we look at things, because I know also the money angle is always a very key factor in these conversations of biophilia. And yeah, it also helps the economic as well.
Hmm. Most, I mean, most natural capital solutions, I would say, give a lot of return on investment and ROI and benefits over time.
Mm,
So maybe there's more of an upfront cost initially, but over time, when
mm-hmm,
you look at all of it holistically and all of the other benefits and the things that it actually brings to the table, there's no
mm-hmm,
comparison on like gray regular infrastructure versus looking at, sustainable infrastructure and really leveraging how water flows through a city and things like that rather than just piping it all the time, for example.
mm,
So, yeah, I think that's amazing. So it
yeah.
sounds like there's just so many lessons just from Africa's ecological knowledge and DNA. Is there a couple of lessons or really critical, lessons that you would like to share that have, resonated deeply with you?
um I slightly mentioned this, but one of the things that really, really fascinate me is the use of the molding of you as a person from the time you're a child into an understanding of the importance of balance in nature. And this was mostly passed through at the courtyards, because the courtyards were where the people, gathered together and danced and shared stories and, connected with the community. So the use of songs, the use of dance, the use of taboos, um, to ensure that the environment is cared for is very fascinating to me. There's a story about the vulture and how it's connected to you, culturally, spiritually, environmentally, and why you cannot kill this animal because this is what it reflects. There's a story of the tortoise. There's a story of this tree. Like I, as a Kikuyu, I'm from the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya, and when you look at our customs, you couldn't cut a mugumu tree. That's a fig tree. There was a whole story around it, culturally and spiritually. And when you think about it, the reason why you can't cut a mugumu tree is because the water, when you see a mugumu tree, there was water beneath it. And they knew if you cut this, then over time we won't be having the waterbed will go low and we won't be having a lot of water. But then it's nested in stories and songs and folk tales, and you grow up knowing you can't cut this, you can't do this. And I really love how that was integrated through song, dance, and play. And I think even when we think about our education systems right now, and we think about kids, I mean, they're the future generation. We need to think a way of reviving or reawakening this knowledge, this way of packaging knowledge into our education right now. So I really love the embedment of culture and spirituality into the environmental care. Yeah.
That is just absolutely priceless and such an incredible way to pass knowledge down. And like you said, I mean, if children learn from it, adults will too, right? I mean, adults will learn from it
Mhm.
just as well as children
Mhm.
will. And it's just
Yeah,
beautiful to know that there's these lessons and maybe folklore and songs, but it's rooted in this very deep knowledge and relationship with the land. I think that's just
exactly.
absolutely wonderful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and that. everything is interconnected. There's a lot of emphasis on that. You're not a freestanding element in nature as a human. You are connected to the trees, to the water, to the land. So systemic thinking is already woven into the cultural or indigenous knowledge. Yeah.
And I think we were talking a little bit about mental health before, but
Mm.
what you're speaking about really creates a sense of community and belonging and awe and wonder and like relationship building. And we don't have, at least where I'm from, we don't have this. And there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of mental health issues.
Mhm.
Tell me how biophilia can kind of help reconnect us with our sense of belonging and sense of stewardship with others and with nature and help us with our mental health crises.
I think by slowing down and looking at nature, because nature is also very interconnected. The tree does not survive alone. The fungi beneath, the mycelium beneath helps to transport information with the other trees. Like there is connection. The birds or the bees are helping with pollination. So I think once we slow down and just study nature and have a framework of looking at nature to understand our problems, then it will help us with our mental health. Now, you've taken me to something I could have forgotten to mention. We do systemic thinking, or rather helping people think like nature, with this tool called Cards for Life. It's actually in the next slide. And this tool is a tool that has been created by looking at nature, studying how nature functions, how nature does, how nature is, and the dynamics of nature. And using this tool, we get to have individual inquiries, organizational workshops where we help people think like nature. Like, for example, you'll find a doing card that mentions, oh, they're a bit far away from me right now. A doing card that mentions a way of doing of nature. Let's say, for example, is fluidity. And there's a river there showcasing how nature is fluid. A way of being of nature, let's say we have impermanence, because there's nothing permanent in life. And then maybe a dynamic of nature, we can have homeostasis. So if you're having mental issues, if you're trying to figure out how do we design more like nature, how do I live more like nature, there's already a framework to be able to assist you. You can incorporate fluidity. How do you do that at an internal level, at an organizational level? How do we look into nature and actually get examples and, slow down and ground ourselves in realizing I'm not
Mm,
bigger than nature. I am part of nature. These are the dynamics nature is using and it's surviving for billions of years. I just need to bring this back into my life. So this
mm,
tool helps us to, deal with these mental issues that we're having of rushing. There's a card on slow and steady that has a tortoise and a way of incorporating slow and steadiness into organizations and your life. So that's how using biophilia or using nature, using these cards has helped us to help people have a better mental life.
yeah, that sounds incredible, and I assume that's in your course, correct?
It's
Yeah,
mentioned in the course, but this is a separate consulting that we do, but it's also mentioned in the course how everything goes. If you want consultation, how to go about it. Yeah.
wonderful. I love the idea of slow and steady. I know my life definitely doesn't look like that, but I would need a lot of people, I'm sure, need that reminder, and I
Mm,
think that's very beautiful. We are already over 40 minutes talking. It's incredible. I don't
okay.
wanna take too much more of your time. Is there anything else that you would like to share today to our community?
Okay. I'd just like to mention about the upcoming event, the African Biophilic Building Conference and Expo. We did our inaugural event last year where we brought everybody together, doctors, farmers, builders, mental health professionals, just to talk about biophilia and to see how to anchor biophilia in the different and respective professions. So this year we've niched down on buildings, and the key theme is building with nature and culture. And I'd just love to invite you all to this conference in Nairobi this year. Last year, we had a lot of participation from East Africa, from Europe, from Italy, and just inviting you to come be part of us, come be part of a movement that is, leading to creation of cities that are anchored in nature, anchored in culture. And yeah, we'd love to partner with organizations that are deep on the biophilic design knowledge as knowledge sponsors, and also see how to match that with cultural knowledge that is really deep here in Africa. So for more information on the event, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow Green Biophilic Living in all our socials. And looking forward to hosting you in Nairobi, Kenya.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for talking with me in the community today. Your knowledge and your passion is just so inspiring. I feel like I learned so much already just in this short time. I'm looking forward to taking your course. And thank you to everyone who joined and who commented and engaged. And just a reminder that this recording will be available for free. And there we will be posting a link to her course, Introductory Africa's Biophilia course, in the comments section. And then I'll also drop my Learn Biophilic Design Masterclass. They are both available. And thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day, evening, or afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody who is